I'm in thought. That's why it looks like I have a angry facial expression. There we go. Okay. Let me write this timing down. What we're going to do is I'm going to switch over before you say good morning or anything. Let me turn this. I don't know what I just did. I apologize for pushing the wrong button. Let's try this again. Gotta love perimenopause, I tell you. Okay. Okay. Uh, I'm going to try to flip this one more time. Good morning. YouTube is acting really crazy. Let me see if I can flip this so y'all can see. Not going to be able to flip the screen this morning because YouTube is tripping. I can send you. I'm going to put this up on the Real Leader Brain page. Gotta love YouTube, I swear. Okay. So I can't flip the screen for you to be able to see it this morning because of the glitches in YouTube. If it's amazing. Good morning, Regina. What we're going to do is go ahead and work with what we have. It is what it is this morning. I will slide out of the way. How about that? And that will give you some of the information. And it's just doubled over. So if you want to do your best to take screenshot now of what's happening, and hopefully tomorrow this will be working properly, but this is what we will be using today. So the top three graphics are what's important today. The bottom two are just a repeat of the ones in the middle. Want to get that going before we get too many comments at the bottom based upon feedback from Nola. Go ahead on your own and inhale and exhale 3 times. We're going to calm the amygdala down, the emotional regulation system, and allow the brain to know that we are learning about how to treat people with dignity and respect today. So on your own, inhale and exhale 3 times. Good morning. I am Dr. Donna Thomas-Rodgers, daughter of Leslie Darnell Thomas, granddaughter of Arthur Jethro Evelyn II, and great-granddaughter of Levi Thomas. Welcome to your morning mental workout. Today's topic is number 20 of the 74 principles of real leadership. Treat people with dignity and respect. We are working our brains out today, so it is important that you hydrate. If you are just now waking up and you haven't drunk any water at all, even with you sleeping, you still can become dehydrated as a result. Go ahead and get some water into your system. Your brain needs it. It's 75% water. Additionally, when you say, I'm thirsty, that means that you're already 2% dehydrated. So your goal is to stay hydrated, not only because it's summer months for some of us, depending on where you live in the world, but it is also to ensure that your body has what it needs. Now, treat people with dignity and respect. And I'd just like to say this up front. I already had this conversation with Nola, but here's what I will say. This is the direct result of things that have taken place in my lifetime, and that is why it is a principle of real leadership. Because what happens is people think based upon a caste system or where you are, if you're the youngest sibling in the family. When I was a second lieutenant, NCOs used to say, "Oh, T, I got more time in the latrine than you got in the Army." So there is this notion that I don't have to treat everybody with dignity and respect if I don't feel like it because I'm older, I'm wise, I outrank you, I have more money than you, you're a peasant, your skin complexion doesn't match my caste system, so I get to treat you like shit. And so I checked myself to say, okay, so how does this relate to when unaccountable people come to my life, just like the person yesterday, and I go ham on them? And here is the thing. I'm not going to anybody else's house, knocking on anybody's door saying, hey, you need to be personally accountable. You need to be personally accountable. So when you step into my realm, when you come into my lives, when you come into my comment section, just imagine if someone came to your home and then they weren't treating you and your belongings with dignity and respect. You would give them a warning, you would have grace and mercy, and then if they persisted, then you would have to elevate and hold people personally accountable. So as we go through the lesson today, know that the number one principle of real leadership is to hold yourself and other people personally accountable. So what happens is I'm a Christian and the whole turn the other cheek and all of that. I'm a gangster Christian, so I only have two cheeks. After that, I got two hands. So we can decide which one you're going to interact with. So everything that I am saying is true until someone is stepping over a boundary, until someone is being so overtly disrespectful that you have to up the ante and switch from treat people with dignity and respect to hold yourself and others personally accountable. So people just don't get to come over here all willy-nilly, just being disrespectful, disrupting this learning environment because they are looking for a dopamine boost, because they are looking for a fight. So if someone is coming to look for a fight, then you must actually defend yourself. And in this instance, with disinhibition effect and the thumb thugs, I use my verbalness as a way to defend myself and to keep this environment in a learning environment. And there's always the block button. So I just want to put that out there. So in the event as I'm saying something and you say, well, that sounds like cognitive dissonance, Dr. Donna, because how can you say that? And I've seen you go ham on people and lives. I've never started any fight. And as I raised my daughter, I said, we don't start fights, but we definitely finish them. So if someone is looking for a fight and they won't remove themselves, then it is at that point that I switch to hold yourself personally accountable and others. And then I use that as an example so that you can see when someone has crossed the boundary for you, it is now time for you to up your ante. Now, I am not saying to get into physical altercations with people, but I am saying that people need to understand, don't come over here. Don't start none, won't be none. If you are looking for a fight, join MMA or get on a video game. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. Today is treat people with dignity and respect. As I mentioned, it is number 20 out of the 74 principles of real leadership in chronological order. The quote for treat people with dignity and respect from my book is that people will follow you everywhere when they respect you. I would also like to say that respect is earned and it's not given. When I was in the military and we had someone that outranked us and they were a bumbling idiot, we would just simply say, respect the rank, not the person. I am not saying that here because I am no longer in the military. I am saying that respect is earned. And when we talked about leadership and cognitive dissonance and all these other things, people, when you're ruling by fear, people don't respect you, they are afraid of you. And that is not the same thing. You don't earn fear. You make people afraid and they go, oh my God. They start doing things because they are afraid, but it is not out of respect. So over here, it is treat people with dignity and respect. There is no hero worshiping, idolization, or fandom over here. Real leadership. The barrier to entry is that you want to learn how to use your brain and become a real leader. That's it. So all this other stuff, ooh, I'm your number one fan, Dr. Don, and all that. No, that's what losers need you to worship them over there in the land of Loserville. We don't do that over here. Okay. So what regions of the brain and what hemispheres are used to treat people with dignity and respect? Treating people with dignity and respect involves a combination. Treating people with dignity and respect involves a combination of brain regions responsible for empathy, emotional regulation, moral reasoning, perspective taking, and social behavior. These regions are distributed across both hemispheres of the brain, but some functions tend to be more dominant in one hemisphere than the other. I was shocked at which hemisphere was more dominant. This was interesting. The first brain region is the medial prefrontal cortex, and this is responsible for self-reflection, empathy, moral judgment, understanding others' emotions and attention, and it is both hemisphere, but right dominant for empathy. Now, when you are treating people with dignity and respect, one thing that unaccountable people can't do because they are ruled, their brain is run by their amygdala, is that they cannot have empathy and they can't understand the emotions of other people because they don't spend, when they're in their default mode network, which is anytime you're by yourself, they are either daydreaming or mind wandering. So there isn't this self-reflection time. And because they don't know who they are, they can't understand anybody else. Because of cognitive dissonance and conformity bias and confirmation bias, they have this set program in their amygdala, and if it doesn't match, they cannot relate. So that's one of the reasons why they can become very disrespectful, because what you're doing doesn't match their narrative, and they lack neuroplasticity and neural pathways to have a connection neurologically to understand they're just different. Embrace diversity is one of the 74 principles of real leadership as well, because that allows you to treat people with dignity and respect. I've said this often. My daughter and I believe that we have had clients from every continent in the world, and everybody has different cultures and different reasons for answering questions, for buying furniture, placing it where they place it, and we treat them with dignity and respect, regardless if they bought a $10 table from Walmart or a $10,000 couch from Lovesac. Every client gets treated with dignity and respect because of who we are and the service that we provide. So you can do that when you have empathy and understanding. Sometimes people are moving, sometimes they're going through a divorce, a loss of a loved one, and so they can't make all of these decisions. The thing that they ordered that didn't turn out right, or it might be the wrong color. And at that point, it's like, okay, calm down. We got this. Go take care of whatever it is that you need to take care of, and know that this is one less thing that you need to worry about on the daily basis. That's treating people with dignity and respect. The next is the anterior cingulate cortex. And this is emotional regulation, error detection, compassion, and social awareness. Again, both hemispheres are involved. And so to treat someone with dignity and respect is to have compassion. And we don't see that a lot in the world today, because most people of these 6.8 billion adults in the world are being ruled by their amygdala. And the amygdala's whole purpose is fight or flight, comfort, protection. No, nobody can get in my way. Nobody can, you're harming me, you're harming me, you're harming me. So when that happens and you have a weak prefrontal cortex, the last thing you're thinking about is being compassionate for someone else, because all you can do is think about yourself day in and day out and protecting you and your stuff. Next is the temporoparietal junction, the TPJ. And this is involved in perspective taking, understanding social cues, and moral reasoning. And it's both hemisphere, again, right dominant for perspective taking. Next is the amygdala. We love the left and right amygdala over here. It is processing emotional salience and empathy. It alerts us to emotional needs of others. And it, again, is both hemispheres right more often because of the emotional aspect. You next have the insular cortex. We call it the insula. And this is for emotional awareness, empathy, especially for physical or emotional pain of others. Both hemispheres, right hemisphere dominant again. So in this instance, I would have never thought that the right hemisphere would be more dominant in treating people with dignity and respect. But when you think about it, the right hemisphere is the one that's always alerting you of bad stuff. So in order for you to override that, it would have to be stronger in order for you to treat people with dignity and respect. Next is the orbital frontal cortex, the OFC, and it's for social decision making, impulse control, and evaluating consequences of others' actions. And it is both hemispheres. And then finally, the seventh one is the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, and that is for moral decision making, value judgments, regulating emotions in social situations. So both. Now, the hemisphere contributions are this. In the right hemisphere, it is more involved with empathy, nonverbal social cues, emotional tone, and moral intuition. Now, this is critical for understanding context, tone of voice, and facial expressions. Something that when I was in my teens and 20s, I didn't pay attention to none of that. You stepped on my shoe, we were going to fight. Left hemisphere, because you were disrespecting me. It's interesting, especially in the hood. It's all this disrespect, you better respect me. A lot of people are not here anymore because of what they perceive from that right amygdala as disrespect. Left hemisphere contributes to verbal expression of respect, ethical reasoning, and rule-based moral thinking. Now, it's more analytical and language-focused in moral decision-making. So in summary, treating others with dignity and respect is a whole brain function, but the right hemisphere regions tend to be more dominant for the empathetic and intuitive aspects, while the left hemisphere contributes to ethical reasoning and communication. What questions do you have about the 7 regions that you use to treat people with dignity and respect before we go into what happens when you avoid treating people with dignity and respect? And if it is clear, simply type "it is clear." and I will proceed. And that is still too hot. Reed, do you have questions regarding the 7 brain regions that I discussed with respect to the principle of real leadership for treating people with dignity and respect? Have you bothered to understand what it is that I'm actually presenting today? I teach about the 74 principles of real leadership that I developed and the theory of personal accountability and the functionality of the brain to access the 86 billion neurons in your brain to create 860 trillion synaptic connections. So do you have a question regarding the 7 brain regions that I discussed with respect to the theory, with respect to the principle of real leadership, treat people with dignity and respect? Do you have questions about what I just reviewed? Thank you, Lola and Regina. I see that you have no questions. Okay, I'm going to move on. So what regions of the brain and hemisphere are impacted? I see your response as well, Nola. Are impacted when people avoid treating people with dignity and respect? Good morning. Okay. We're talking about avoid what people do to avoid treating people with dignity and respect. And so I feel like this is apropos as Reed is demonstrating the avoidance of treating people with dignity and respect. So I explained to Reed what it is that I was doing, and Reed has decided that they would be disrespectful, disrupt what I'm saying, and currently are still not respecting what I asked them to do. Okay, so I'm going to move on. So when people avoid treating others with dignity and respect, I'm conducting an experiment now. So let's see how this goes. When people avoid treating others with dignity and respect, several key brain regions are underactivated, disconnected, or overridden, leading to decreased empathy, impaired moral judgment, and poor social regulation. This disengagement affects both hemispheres, and a dominant impact on the right hemisphere functions, involved in empathy and social emotional processing. I believe that that is what we are experiencing this morning from Reed. So thank you, Reed, for being part of the lesson. I could not have timed this better. Okay. So let's look at Reed's impaired or underactive brain regions when it comes to treating people with dignity and respect. And people have dropped off. Yes. So Reed, take notes. Go grab pen and paper to understand why you are being disrespectful right now. So you are not using your medial prefrontal cortex, and it is reducing your empathy. It is impairing your social awareness and your lack of moral reflection. That means that when you are in your default mode network time, you are not doing self reflection. You are daydreaming and mind wandering, and it impacts both your left and right hemispheres. Additionally, the next region is your anterior cingulate cortex. So you have a blurred emotional regulation, and it is decreased compassion, and you have lower guilt or concern. Again, you are not using both hemispheres. Next is your temporal parietal junction. You have a weakened perspective taking, and there is an inability to understand others' needs or mental status. So that is you are right dominant. Next is your amygdala. You have a blunted emotional response to others' distress and reduced emotional salience. Again, both left and right hemispheres. Next, you have a weakened insular cortex, or as we refer to it over here, the insula. So you have a lower emotional self-awareness, a lack of empathy or concern for others, and this is your right amygdala taking over right now, which is being hijacked, which is why you are demonstrating fight, flight, freeze, or appease. Next is your orbital cortex, the OFC, orbital frontal cortex. And so you have poor social judgment, impulsivity. Clearly, you are demonstrating that right now, and a disregard for consequences of others, both using your right and left hemisphere. And now the final one is that it is your ventromedial prefrontal cortex. So it is impaired moral decision making and diminished sense of social responsibility, where you are again impacting both your left and right hemispheres. Let's just give you a breakdown of the hemisphere impact. So your right hemisphere is impacted more, obviously, because of what you're saying and doing. So you have a diminished empathetic resonance. And so what happens is you are reading facial expressions and emotional context and moral intuition. And so there's a disengagement on your part as it relates to your callous behavior, lack of remorse, and dismissiveness. From a left hemisphere perspective, you are less involved in the emotional breakdown, but there is verbal rationalization, and it may be used to justify unethical or disrespectful actions. So in summary, avoiding respectful treatment of others often reflects a deactivation or dysfunction in circuits responsible for empathy, social reasoning, and emotional regulation. A stronger impact to your right hemisphere is taking place, which governs emotional and interpersonal understanding. And I'm going to slide out of the way so you all can see. If you look at the right, that is all of the brain regions that are grounded in neuroscience that will be impacted negatively when you're not using your brain to treat people with dignity and respect. Right. And so, Reed, if you're still here, here's what's taking place, young person, because I don't know if you're male, female, what you identify as. You believe that getting that dopamine boost is worth it. And that's what makes you an addict to dopamine. It is a manufactured dopamine boost that you have trained your brain that you need an external excitatory connection in order for you to have a dopamine boost. Now, the reason why that's going to hurt you long term is because after the age of 35, your working memory starts to deteriorate. And because you are focused on getting high on dopamine every day, when it is time for you to use your working memory as you age, you're going to become dumber than you already are. And as a result, you will not be able to navigate through your day-to-day life. So as you engage with people, if you have offspring, if your offspring have offsprings, you're going to be the dumb papa or mama because you are choosing an addictive behavior and you actually think that this is productive. You don't even know that your right amygdala is ruining your prefrontal cortex, which is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. So as you get passed over for promotions at work, as you lose money in business deals, as you begin to be the person that no one wants to talk to because your personal lexicon is virtually mute, that is going to be the reason why people stop talking to you as you go forward. And so what that will produce is a vicious cycle where you will continue to troll people on the internet and become unaccountable, because just like addicts that are addicted to drugs, you are addicted to dopamine, and your life will become even more unmanageable than it already is. That's what's taking place. So while you feel that you're winning today, long term, because you can't see past today because you're an addict, long term, you're going to get dumber and dumber. That's what's actually going to take place. So at this point, I know you think you've won, but the people who are on here every day and the people who actually have more neural pathways than the 10 that you're using right now, based upon being able to have 860 trillion synaptic connections, you're actually losing. And I gave you grace and I gave you mercy to give you an actual lesson for you. And you've given the people on this live a great lesson, because what they see is what I just said neurologically is taking place. You have no empathy. You have no self-reflection to understand what's taking place. You are being socially disrespectful because you are a dopamine addict and all you can think about is yourself. You have a big giant ego with low confidence and low self-esteem, and that's unfortunate for you, but you actually can wire your brain to use your prefrontal cortex. You can stop being led astray, run amok, hoodwinked, and bamboozled by your little bitty teeny tiny right amygdala. So before you get out of here, I would just like to say that this is an almond. And this is the amount of your brain that you're using. You're letting this almond-shaped brain tissue run your life. And that is why things are not going well for you. You are extremely disrespectful to people, and you are justifying it, just like I just said, because you're letting your amygdala run your brain instead of your prefrontal cortex. That's what's taking place. That's what's taking place. Okay. So you're going to go away, and I'm going to continue to use my 860 trillion synaptic connections to change the world for people who are not stupid like you. So you can go away, and the next person can go away too. But before you go, everybody, let's give Reed a round of applause for being the lesson today. We had a live model. We had a live model. So everybody, yay. Thank you, Reed. Thank you for demonstrating what happens when your amygdala, your right amygdala, is hijacked and everything that you're doing. And I told you, ladies and gentlemen, that this is what someone was going to say. Remember, I gave you the disclaimer at the beginning of the live that someone would come along, be unaccountable, and then tell me that I'm being disrespectful. When I said you have to go back to the number one principle of real leadership, which is to hold others personally accountable. Now, Reed came over here looking for a dopamine boost. I told Reed to just stay and pay attention. Reed got to be the example for the class, the court gesture, the dunce in the classroom. And now Reed is upset. And now, because Reed didn't get the actual dopamine, that boost that they wanted, now I'm being disrespectful. Isn't that amazing? This is a beautiful real world example of what happens when someone has a very weak prefrontal cortex and a very, very strong right amygdala. Okay, so Reed, you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you find as much dopamine as you need and that you never get to use your working memory again, because that is what you deserve. So you go off and find another dopamine pusher to get that little bump that you're going to need over and over and over again, because you didn't get it here, but you did get schooled. Take care, sir or ma'am. Okay, let's make sure all those comments are gone. Okay. Was that clear, ladies and gentlemen, on what happens when you avoid treating people with dignity and respect? I love God, higher power, in the universe, because lessons just show up. So that was awesome. Clear on that? And I will move on to brain-based activities to strengthen dignity and respect. There's no way that Reed was going to get this information, because Reed didn't deserve to have this new neural pathway connection. No wire and fire for Reed. Are we clear? So that I can move on. What you can do, Sasky, is you can continue. I'm not here to do that as well. What you can do is you can go watch previous lives today. If you choose to stay, you need to be respectful. I am teaching to teach people how to use their brain to treat people with dignity and respect. That's what this lecture is about. I will not be sidelined. I have prepared a learning environment for this topic, and that is today's topic. So there is time to ask questions at the end and when I finish segments. So at this point, I've explained my answer to you, and I need to proceed with the lesson that I have in place. Okay, so here are brain-based activities grounded in neuroscience that strengthen the neural circuits responsible for treating people with dignity and respect. These activities activate and enhance regions like the medial prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, the insula, the temporal parietal junction, and the orbital frontal cortex. So here are the brain-based activities. Number one, you can do empathy writing. So you can write daily reflections on how others may feel in different situations. Now, the neuroscience benefit for this is that it enhances emotional self-awareness and perspective taking. The brain regions that are activated when you do this are the medial prefrontal cortex, the temporal parietal junction, and the insula. So you're going to write. And remember, when you write things out, you're enacting the left hemisphere, but you're also doing a brain dump to get things out of your head. And it allows you the ability to have perspective taking. When you are strengthening your prefrontal cortex and you are using your default mode network, you are constantly being self-aware and taking perspective of the things that you have taken in through the day. And it just allows you to have a different perspective. Next is a gratitude letter. And I like this activity because it reminds me of the time when I was in the military and I actually used to write letters to people. It also reminds me of my primary method of communication, which is email, which I find is much more expressive and people become much more honest in emails because you're not there in real time. So they are in their default mode network typing the email and then I am reading it at a different time and it just helps with the communication. In this regard, gratitude letter writing. So what you can do is write a heartfelt letter, even if it's not sent, to someone that you appreciate. So that means that you can write the letter to someone who's no longer here with us in physical form. And what this does is it increases pro-social emotions and it strengthens your social bonding circuits. And that's the brain regions that this is activating is the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, the orbital frontal cortex, and the amygdala. Gratitude is something that you can always access. And at this moment, I would like to say that gratitude isn't being grateful that someone has less than you, but gratitude is about being grateful for someone who has more than you, because the opposite of gratitude is envy. So you can't say, I'm grateful that I have a house because there are people who don't. You say, I'm grateful that I have a home, even though there are people that live in mansions. So that's real gratitude. Next, you can do role reversal scenarios. Mentally or in discussions, take the perspective of someone else in a conflict. Sometimes we refer to that as the devil's advocate. And what that's going to do is boost perspective taking and moral reasoning. The brain regions that are activated during this time are the temporal parietal junction, the medial prefrontal cortex, and the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex. And what it also allows you to do is get out of your caste system, get out of your conformity bias, your confirmation bias, and your negativity bias. When you say, why did this, I'm a woman, so why did this man make this decision? Why did this teenager make this decision? Why did this baby boomer make this decision? What is happening? When you look at it from their perspective, now you are shifting. New neurons are wiring and firing to give you a different connection. And so there are people who you don't wear shoes and you have to cover your shoes or take your shoes off in their house. There are people who, no matter what we do, they are going to feed us or give us a snack when we leave because that is their custom. Even though it may be the first job of the day, we will say, no, we just had breakfast, we just had coffee, they will feel bad. No, in our custom, okay, cool, yes, I'll have some decaf coffee. Thank you for the cookie, I appreciate it. So understanding that treating people with dignity and respect is also embracing diversity, which is one of the 74 principles of real leadership. So recently, we just had some people from India that gave us chai tea. Oh my goodness, it was so good. And just left, and we left, and they gave us snacks and fruits and everything. They were like, you just helped us so much. We appreciate it. And so you get to have these cultural experiences. We were helping someone basically almost furnish their whole house. So she was Korean and she cooked us a meal. And we all the contractors had to sit at the table and have lunch and then go back to work. So when you are doing this role reversal, whether it's happening in real life or in your head, it allows you to have this different perspective, and then you can appreciate and respect something that is different than you. Next is mindful listening practice. So practice listening without interrupting or judging. Listen is 2 of the 74 principles of real leadership because you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should be listening twice the amount of time that you're talking. And what this does is it builds emotional regulation and social attunement. And so you're going to be using your ACC, your Insula, and your OFC. Next is loving kindness meditation, repeating phrases, wishing well on self and others. You can actually do that and it will change how you feel. It will definitely think positive is one of the 74 principles of real leadership. And what this will also do is prune your hardwiredness for negativity bias. So it will chip away at that synaptic connections because you won't be using it. And the whole concept of the brain when it comes to synaptic connections and neural pathway is use it or lose it. So this will stimulate compassion networks and reduces negativity bias, as I mentioned. You're going to be using the insula, the ACC, and the amygdala to do this. Next is acts of silent service. Do something helpful without needing credit for recognition. Do something helpful. Every time I see a celebrity, a sports person, or somebody standing next to some charity event, some backpacks for school is getting ready to be a big thing because school is getting ready to start out. And I say that is it's just publicized false modesty. Oh my goodness, we're so happy that we gave. We're so happy that we gave. No one needs to know that. And I tell people to do random acts of kindness. If you're in a drive-through, you can say, what's the next 3 cars orders behind me? I'm going to pay for everybody's food and leave. So by the time people get to the window and they say your food is paid for, they're going to be like, who did it? And they're not going to know who did it. And you just move on. So that is something that you can do. And so it builds intrinsic pro-social empowerment using your ventral medial prefrontal cortex, your OFC, and your MPFC. You can pay for somebody's lunch. You're getting ready to leave. They just sat down and ordered their food. You can say, give me their receipt, their ticket, and then you can pay for it and leave. And by the time they finish their lunch, they're gonna be like, who paid for my lunch? I have no idea. And it can be simple things. You can cut your neighbor's lawn, shovel, rake their leaves or snow. Somebody 5 houses down from you, and they don't even know what happened. They just wake up and now their grass is cut. So that's what you can do as well. Now, facial emotion recognition training. Use apps or real life practice to read facial expressions accurately. Now, what this does is it enhances social sensitivity and nonverbal empathy using the right amygdala and the medial prefrontal cortex. You can do something as simple as on a screen time, something as simple as if you're watching a show, don't have the caption on. And did that get rid of you? Yeah, there we go. And you could just turn the sound down and read people's facial expressions, because sometimes if you do it on social media, they already have the captions there, so then you would still know what they were saying. But it works very well. Or you could be out and about and just look at people's facial expressions, conversations. We live in Las Vegas, so we have the ability. People are coming from everywhere, and you just see all types of people with various different backgrounds. Next is moral dilemma discussions. So reflect or discuss real life dilemmas involving fairness and kindness. So it sharpens your moral cognition and reflective empathy. And you're going to be using your medial prefrontal cortex, your temporal parietal junctions, and your ventral medial prefrontal cortex. And we did this yesterday. We had a conversation with a client, and she was discussing that her son is an addict. I was telling him I grew up in the house with 3, telling her I grew up in the house with 3 addicts. And she was saying, well, what is the solution? So we were having a conversation about that and how can this be eradicated because of the damage that it causes to so many people's household. Drugs and alcohol don't care about your sexual orientation, your gender, your ethnic background, your socioeconomic status, your education. It doesn't matter. People become addicted, and then nobody's life is the same for the people that are connected to that person. So how do you eradicate this and fix it for good? Because there have been addicts since the beginning of time. And then finally, daily respect checklist. So self-rate how you treated others. So listening, fairness, patience. And what this does is it builds metacognition and accountability so that you can be more accountable and more respectful. And metacognition is the awareness and understanding of one's own thoughts, which is what you do when you're in your default mode network. And this is the regions that you're using are the medial, prefrontal cortex, the ACC, and the OFC. And so here's a daily practice plan that you can use, and it's optional. In the morning, you can do 5 or 10 minutes of loving kindness meditation and gratitude writing. Midday, you can use 5 minutes of silence acts of service. So you can just go and do things and not really say, hey, I need credit for that. Give me credit for that. That's what unaccountable people need, because again, they're looking for external dopamine boost because they can't produce it naturally themselves. In the evening time, 10 minutes to reflect in your writing on dignity and respect moments that you had throughout the day, or role reversal. And then weekly, you can do 15 to 30 minutes of a group discussion or moral reflection activity just to get it going. So we talk about treating people with dignity and respect in elementary school, and then for some reason after that, middle school is all hands on deck, bullying and all kind of stuff, and then that just goes into adult life, and we don't go back to it ever again. What questions do you have about the activities to strengthen that neural pathway of treat people with dignity and respect? And if it is clear, I will go to the benefits, and then we will close out with the brain bit for today. No, it's itching for allergies. I think that's your current, your nuclear, Lola. Yes, Virginia, I see you're clear. So coming around third, treating people with dignity and respect not only benefits, yes, Nola, you as well, relationships and communities, but it also strengthens key brain regions and circuits responsible for empathy, moral reasoning, emotional regulation, and pro-social behavior. These benefits are distributed across both hemispheres, as we have seen, and with specific right hemisphere dominance for emotional and social awareness. Again, I am shocked. I thought for sure that treating people with dignity and respect was going to be left hemisphere dominant, but it makes sense. If you're going to be disrespectful, the right amygdala is always popping off. So that's the hemisphere that would have to be strong in order for you to treat people with dignity and respect. And so here are the brain benefits. In your medial prefrontal cortex, the benefit is that you have strengthened empathy, self, other, reflection, and social reasoning. And it's both left and right hemisphere. For the ACC, it improves emotional regulation, compassion, and impulse control. We know that in the executive function of your brain, that's where inhibitory control is. And so when you are using your prefrontal cortex to make all your decisions, you stop the right amygdala before it starts acting and doing something that it's going to say or do and regret in the future. And in this instance, is both hemispheres as well. Next is the temporal parietal junction, and it enhances perspective taking and social understanding. That's right dominant. And it would make sense that you're socially somewhere, you see something happening, and you're not being disrespectful based upon what you see, but you're being respectful of what you actually see. The orbital frontal cortex, it promotes ethical decision making and social restraint. Both hemispheres are used. Next is the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, and so it sharpens your moral judgment and alignment with values. You will be using both hemispheres for that. The insular cortex, it increases emotional self-awareness and it activates your empathy. It's right dominant, because if you think about it, if you don't have empathy, that means the right amygdala has taken over and said, fuck you, I got to protect me. So empathy means I'm looking at it from your perspective. I'm understanding what's taking place for you, and I need to be respectful of you. But if the right amygdala and the right hemisphere is like, no, I got to protect me, so I don't give a fuck about you. And then the amygdala, it boosts sensitivity to others' emotions and reduces emotional reactivity when regulated. That is why the prefrontal cortex has to be in charge, because without it, the right amygdala is going to pop off and it will be in charge. And the next thing you know, you will be doing all kinds of things that don't make sense and that end up causing other people to fight, flight, freeze, or appease. And it will be extremely disrespectful. and both the right and left hemispheres. But for the right hemisphere, it's more dominant, and because it is attuned to what's actually taking place, what they can see. Now, the hemisphere benefits as a breakdown for the right hemisphere is emotional intuition and empathetic resonance, reading tone, body language, and facial expressions, nonverbal moral cues, so sensing pain, discomfort, or joy, and then enhanced moral awareness and emotional depth. For the left hemisphere, the benefits are ethical reasoning, using language and logic, reflective understanding of social norms and expectations, and then expressing respect through words and structured dialogue. And that's what I was thinking when I said, yeah, this is probably left hemisphere dominated. Wasn't paying attention to looking and all of that the right hemisphere and the right amygdala end up participating in. So treating others, in summary, treating others with dignity and respect is a whole brain activity. You need your whole brain to treat people with dignity and respect. And it strengthens the right hemisphere for social and emotional systems. It enhances empathy, perspective taking, and moral insight. And it promotes resilience, cooperation, and trust building through better regulated and connecting brain circuits. And so I'm going to move out of the way again so that you can see to the left under the main drawing that those are the benefits when you connect to the right brain regions, the correct brain regions to treat people with dignity and respect. What questions do you have about the benefits before I go into today's brain bit? Or if it's clear, it is clear, and that's cool. I see you're clear, Lola. Okay, Noah. Regina may have stepped away. Okay. So the brain bit for today is treating people with dignity and respect. It is inspired by yours truly. How you treat others is a direct reflection of how well your brain integrates empathy, integrity, and self-awareness. Dignity isn't a gesture. It's a neurological decision. Dr. Donna Thomas-Rodgers. So I'll say that again. How you treat others is a direct reflection of how well your brain integrates empathy, integrity, and self awareness. Dignity isn't a gesture, it is a neurological decision. So, here are some neuroscience insights. Treating people with dignity and respect engages and strengthens key brain regions. Regina says clear. I'm surprised by this and had no idea of the impact of treating people with dignity and respect. I know, right? It's amazing. It is amazing what's happening neurologically or not happening neurologically. So treating people with dignity and respect engages and strengthens key brain regions, and we talked about that, the medial prefrontal cortex for empathy and reasoning and understanding others' perspectives. The ACC cortex, it is for emotional regulation and conflict resolution. The insula for compassion and internal awareness and fairness. The temporal parietal junction for recognizing others' intentions and dignity. And then the ventral medial prefrontal cortex for value-based decision making and social norms. And the brain benefits are consistently practicing dignity and respect. It increases your emotional intelligence, your trust building and team cohesion, whether it's personally or professionally. It reduces reactive behavior. So instead of you constantly letting that right amygdala pop off, because you are treating people with dignity and respect, you don't have that reactivity. You are regulating your emotions. And it's also better for mental resilience and inner calm because you are practicing it in your default mode network, because your prefrontal cortex is running your brain instead of your left or right amygdala or both. you have the ability to have this inner calm. And the daily brain training that you can do is pause before reacting. What that's going to do is activate your ACC. So take that 5-second pause that we've talked about previously and say, I'm not going to react, I'm going to respond. And that's enough time for the amygdala to be quiet and the prefrontal cortex, the ACC, is going to send an alert. Hey, she about to pop off. And prefrontal cortex says, nope, that's not what's going to happen. You're not going to be disrespectful. You're going to be respectful. And then you can ask yourself, how would I feel in their shoes? And what's going to happen is you're going to engage your medial prefrontal cortex. So remember, respect is more than social. It's neurosocial. Neurosocial. So think about your brain all the time, because that is what's running the show. And you're going to practice it, and you rewire your brain for stronger human connections. When you are treating people with dignity and respect, your relationships are stronger, because it's what difference does a difference make. Nola and I have different diets. I'm not being disrespectful when she decides to put ketchup on things. Oh my God, you putting ketchup on everything. Look at you, all of this. Oh wow, you don't like drinking coffee. What the fuck is wrong with you? There you go, drinking that cocoa. That's a drink for weak people. That's being disrespectful to her food choices. That's not going to bode well. So she has different tastes in her clothes than I have in mine. And so I'm saying, wow, you got that from your dad. He is a colorful, sanguine person when it comes time to get dressed, and so is she. So I'm not saying, well, it didn't work out with him. Why you get that shit on looking like your damn daddy right now? That's being disrespectful. So if you think about all the negative things that you say to people that you're in relationships with, imagine when you just embrace diversity. Imagine when you encourage whatever it is that they're doing. That's how you become close. The reason why families are not close is because of the disrespectful nature of the patriarch and the matriarch and the older siblings in the family. They have decided you're the youngest, or the youngest is disrespectful. Like, I'm the baby, I'm right, I get whatever I want. And it's all this disrespect. It's not neurosocial. It's very antisocial. It's very caste system. This your role. We talk about you. You the youngest. You ain't shit. You the black sheep of the family and everything else. And it's so disrespectful. And then you want us to stay stuck together. That's why I call it a stuck Malay with some stents. You can't get around your friend group. You know, we just talking shit. We just make fun of you. You can't take a joke. You can't take, and you just keep saying it. Who wants to be the butt of the joke every time you get around stuck Malays and stents? It's extremely disrespectful. And it is the norm. We have leaders, world leaders, being disrespectful to other people, and then they wonder why nations can't get along. Because look at the disrespect. And it isn't a matter of punching people and everything else. It's the words. It's how, if you walk into someone's home and they say, when I lived in Michigan, I would say, take your shoes off. Everybody like, take our shoes off. Why you trying to take your bougie ass? Your carpet gonna get dirty. Just keep it clean. And I'm like, I don't want your dirty shoes on my carpet. Just take them off at the door. It's real simple. You need a pair of socks, here you go. But that alone is disrespectful. My sister sending me an email recently telling me to call her when I have expressed to them time and time again, my preferred method of communication is email. It's disrespectful for me to pick up the phone and call you, and you're the one who caused all the harm to me. That's just disrespectful for me to just take it on the chin. So when you think about neurosocial and you can't interact with people, disrespect is a large part of why those relationships are failing. What questions do you have about the brain bit or treating people with dignity and respect and anything that I've covered before we do our final 2 questions for the day? And if it's clear, say clear, and then we will get to the 2 questions. Getting a little heartburn. Neurosocial was a new word for me as well. Okay, final 2 questions for today. I'm going to make it 3 today. What did you learn today? What did you learn about yourself? And what did you learn about your brain? Well, there was a lot. I'm still thirsty. I took a lot out of my brain. Regina is thinking. Thinking about the time. So on my mind, I realize all those thoughts together, all in any kind of weather. What did you learn today? What did you learn about yourself? And what did you learn about your brain? Regina has said, I learned that treat people with dignity and respect has a neurological component. Didn't know this. What I'm learning, Regina, is that everything has a neurological component. What I've done recently, because I've been on the Bible app for 1,771 days, and as a result, things keep repeating themselves. And so just like with the church, I'm like, do I still need to be on a Bible app? Because it's not giving me what I need. And so I started a new Bible notebook yesterday. And what I did was I took the verse of the day, put it in the ChatGPT, and said, what brain regions do you need to apply? And then it was the verse of the day. It was Matthew, I forgot what it was, for yesterday. And then it gave me this whole neurological explanation as to how to connect those two. It was very interesting. And then it gave me the brain graphic for all the regions that were doing it. And at first I was like, ooh, you're supposed to know separation of church and state, and you can't be logical with God and all of that. But I was like, I need to be logical because they stuck. And it was an amazing thing that I did. And so I am attaching everything to the brain. I'm like, chat, how does this connect to the brain? How does this connect to the brain? How does it connect to the brain? Or does it connect? And if it doesn't, how do we connect it? So this is going to be an interesting new spiritual journey that I am on because I'm connecting it. Because for me, all that time, I was like, but how do you do this? How does this apply today? How am I? People kept telling me, you too rational. You trying to be too rational. You can't, it ain't like that. And I'm like, but it can be. But it can be. If you're using your brain to read it, shouldn't you be using your brain to apply it? And the answer is yes. Lola said, dignity and respect play a major role of the brain when it's being used. Yes, ma'am. And Lola said, I learned that treat people with dignity and respect is operating in the right hemisphere of the brain. Oh, Lola said, Dr. Donna, speaking of chat, I'm asking chat for brain bits 5 times a day. That is amazing. I'm telling you, man, chat is the business. It is the business. It is giving you the answers. I mean, if you think about it, how hard it was to get information even 15 years ago. And now it's just at your fingertips. The customized information that you need is amazing. It is a nice little dopamine, natural little dopamine boost. You ask a question and actually get an answer without some bullshit packed on top of it or some spin or cognitive dissonance or bias to the answer. Regina, for myself, I learned a new word, neurosocial. I have experienced positive impact of neuroscience, social interactions, but didn't know the vocabulary. Yes, that is amazing. It definitely is. It's amazing what happens when you go and search. You get all this other new information that you were aware of. And like I said, for me, I clearly thought it was going to be left hemisphere dominant. And then I said, right hemisphere, what? And I was like, oh, yes, because that's where disrespect is coming from. So to strengthen it, you're going to have to do the opposite of everything that you would do to be disrespectful, which the majority of that is happening in the right hemisphere. So it definitely has been interesting. And as you all are continuing to type, I will summarize my interaction with Reed. As I said before I started, that treat people with dignity and respect is one of the 74 principles of real leadership. However, holding yourself and others and personally accountable overrides that. And there is a level of grace and a grace period before it is now turning into accountability. Noah said, I learned about myself. The reason I could end up having the wrong tone is because even though I'm trying to treat people with dignity and respect, I am operating in the right amygdala instead of the right prefrontal cortex. Oh, you just brought tears to your mama's eyes. See, this is when people say, why are you proud of your children? This moment right here is a proud moment. I am a proud mama right now. Yes, it is moments like this that just make me say, yes, that's my child that said that. Okay. Regina, I learned that this increases my inner calm and emotional intelligence. And Lola said, I am trying to focus on the parts of the brain that I need strengthening in. Yes. And so all of that. So in summary, going back to the Reed situation, my efforts were to demonstrate that Reed was being disrespectful because it was perfect timing for when you are not treating people with dignity and respect, all of the brain regions, and let me slide out of the way. So it is the right graphic that you see. All of those brain regions are diminishing or dimming or not being activated by treating people with dignity and respect. And even though Reed was being disrespectful, my respectfulness was to explain to Reed why this was occurring neurologically and what was going to happen as a result of Reed consistently doing this. Additionally, when I said, yes, I hope your working memory doesn't work, because Reed was not receptive to this. And what's going to happen is one day Reed is going to be sitting somewhere because I planted this neurological seed, and Reed is not going to be able to answer a question to somebody that actually respects Reed. And they're going to lose respect for Reed. And then Reed is going to remember what I said and will have a neurological shift. It will take place because I planted that. And now that's sitting back in the hippocampus. It went through the working memory, sitting in the hippocampus in the temporal lobe, and it's going to be there. And then Reed will have a cathartic moment and go, whoa, I need to start working on my working memory. It's not going to work. When you wake up every day looking for that dopamine boost, that's all you're going to get. And that is addictive. And so now you feel like you won, but you're going to feel like you're losing. So then you're going to keep trying to get a dopamine boost, and you're going to keep losing until you bottom out. And then you're going to realize, and that's why I showed Reed, here is this amygdala. This little bitty thing got you running around acting like a complete idiot all day long, when you could be using all of this, and you down here using this little bitty thing that doesn't know how to function properly. So it's a poor choice. And so I let Reed stay so that you could see what happens neurologically when someone refuses to treat people with dignity and respect. And it was almost like we were doing an Argentine tango back and forth to show you everything that I was saying neurologically was everything that Reed was actually doing. So the next time you experience someone treating you less than having dignity and respect, you can understand all of those 7 brain regions that are being impacted. The amygdala is running the show. And at that point, you got to go, because there is no reasoning when someone is in a hijacked amygdala state. They cannot hear or process anything that you are saying or doing. And because of their conformity bias, cognitive dissonance, and negativity bias, they are not going to be bought in, and they are going to become more disrespectful. So you hold them personally accountable, exit stage left physically or virtually, and then you have the right to not interact with them again because of the overt disrespect. You don't have to take disrespect from anybody. I don't care who they are. Point blank period. Captain Lexi Gaylord tried to be disrespectful to me, and I wasn't buying it, which is why I got a bad OER and everything else, because I was like, I don't give a fuck about this army, nothing else. What I'm not going to do is be your bitch. That's not what's buying. I probably, in 1996, I probably said that. Knowing me, I had zero filter. I didn't have tact at all. Even after Sergeant Morgenstern tried to make me have tact, I was a work in progress. But I'm sure that's what took place. So again, treat people with dignity and respect. It is for you and for everybody else that you interact with, and it creates better relationships for the people that are around you and you experience contact with on a daily basis. That's my time for today. God willing, higher power in the universe. I will be back tomorrow, same time, same place, safe space for people who actually want to learn how to use their brain. I will have on a different brain t-shirt. You all go off and have a brain-tastic day. Take care.